get it completed ahead of September. So, we would have had to announce in August, and there wasn't capacity to do that. So that's why it was announced at the date it was. But we backdated it because we wanted to make sure that anyone who would be eligible under that new criteria would be able to benefit from it straight away. The alternative would be to delay it until September the following year. Anyone who might change their decision on whether to apply for university as a result of this change, because they can now access more money, will still be able to apply for September 26. It just means anyone who is already studying, some people have got a bit of extra money now, which just makes things a little bit easier for them.
And also the few students, and it is a few students, who are contacted by Student Finance if they're potentially eligible for a higher grant. So effectively, we've got it going as quickly as we can, rather than wait until next September, deal with the small number of students it might affect this year, and it'll be in place then.
Oh, okay. So what has Student Finance done to inform students and the public about this change?
It has changed on the website, I believe. The information on the website has changed, which is our main sort of portal for all of the information on that. We're obviously talking about it today. And as I said, students have been who have identified have been contacted. So it's in the same way as we would have other areas.
Do you believe the website is fully up to date?
Yes, I believe it is.
Yes.
Yeah, so it does encompass all the changes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think, when we're talking about higher education students, putting information there, I think it is accessible to them. They've managed to get access to higher education. They certainly should be accessible to it. And also, I've got to say, the Student Finance team are very, very accommodating when it comes to questions, and I would encourage people to contact them if they have a query. They are extremely helpful. They're always busy, but they are more than willing to help.
Okay. So the Education Grants and Allowances 2018 law applies to individuals over the age of 16. However, the new definition will only apply to those over the age of 18. So please could you outline the reasons for this?
We don't get 16-year-olds going to higher education, or very rarely.
But does that mean that if they start working at 16 or 17, that those years of work won't count towards their 3 years?
At this stage, the answer is yes, I believe.
Yes, so the reason the Education Grants Order applies to those who are over the age of 16 is because there are grants for further education in there. So higher education would be at 18 years old. There are skills grants, there are skills bursaries for people who are over the age of 16 to under the age of 19. That's why it applies to people of that age group, but higher education would be generally people at 18.
But just to check, the 3 years of employment, does that only start from after 18?
An adult.
So they could be working at 16 and 17, that wouldn't count?
What?
They wouldn't, under other legislation, meet the definition of an adult. So there are various different laws where there is a definition of an adult, and that is 18 years old. And then there are certain laws, I think, where they reference people at the age of 16 to 18. So the advice that we received from the law officers was that an adult under the majority of legislation is 18 years old. So when we want to apply the rule, it made sense to apply the rule to those who are 18 years old and above.
Okay, so we just wanted that clarified, that if you're 17 and you're working for a year, that year won't count.
Yeah.
But can I just ask what follows on from that then? Do you consider that there could be any claims for discrimination in this policy, for example, where some courses like dance, for example, would be applied for at a younger age?
No, I think we accommodate as much as we can. I think you're finding very, very specific individual cases, which we do try to accommodate. There is also funding, as we've said, for 16 to 18-year-olds, and these are university courses which are defined in the higher education law as courses to be funded. If there are individual cases, then do contact us. And if the law needs to change into the future because of those, and I'm sure it can be looked at. But this change is a positive change for those specific individuals who, we don't have many appeals at all in this area. So
Not this year,
No, and that's really understandable, and that sounds good. It's just that we wanted to clarify the position for anyone who would be in that position, so we have got that clarified.
yeah, but I think going straight to a question on discrimination law is way beyond where we need to be quite frank.
Well, I think that as scrutiny, this is the sort of questions that we're expected to ask. So what is the estimated cost of this change in the definition of independent student?
Well, this year it's very, very little. Very little indeed. Then we've had to estimate. Now, if we estimate everybody who could possibly be, then I mean the lower range of the estimate is £200,000 a year, but that is, I think, a massive overestimate personally, because that's assuming that the reason that people haven't gone to university is because of funding. It may well be that students haven't gone to university because they don't want to, they want to do something else, they haven't got the qualifications, that's not the pathway they've chosen, etc., etc. So all we can do is take all of the numbers from year 10 and extrapolate up. So yes, it's not a very precise science, but we get a maximum number. I don't think it would be anywhere near that. We have very few students who are in that situation. However, what it does say is that we have updated a law, a rule, a regulation, whatever it is, that has been there a long time and needed looking at. And so we're pleased to have done that.
And how many students have retrospectively applied for this academic year?
Well, they haven't.
To say?
Yeah, if you want.
It's less than 10 have become eligible since September 25.
Okay, and have there been any additional cost as a result of the reassessment of some individuals?
The estimate is about £1,000 in total.
Okay,
That's it.
I think that's...
So it's not a significant amount. Can I just say that? It's not a significant amount, but it's a significant change so that the rules are up to date.
Okay, that's you guys.
I just wanted to just explore a bit more about the Education Grants and Allowances Law, specifically around appeals. So if an independent student or a person who'd applied to be an independent student wanted to appeal a decision, Article 34.5 in the Education and Grants Allowances Law relates to appeals, said that there must be a dispute of facts or of the law applied in reaching the decision, but you haven't made a change to the law to reflect the policy change that you've made. So I think our question is whether that puts students at an unfair advantage if they choose to appeal.
Minister, would you like me to?
Yes, because, I mean, we've made a change to the rules and regulations around that, which is a positive change. Yes, would you like to?
So the order, the law refers to financially independent. Yeah. So a decision made to treat someone as financially independent falls in scope of the order. It's just that outside of the order, we have provided a further clarification as to what financially independent means. That still has the same standing because it is published guidance, and that's why there was a ministerial decision to document the change of decisions. So a decision to award a grant is made under this order, and if someone is determined financially independent or not, that would determine their grant. And then the guidance that is published and has the same effect as a rule would then enable that person to appeal on that basis.
But would the appeal board view the rule and the order as the equivalent of what the law says?
They would view the rule that has been published that is linked to the order by virtue of the definition of financially independent. They would consider that appeal. That the student, if they wanted to appeal on the basis, they would be able to.
They would be able to appeal,
Yes.
but would the appeal board have their hands
That's up to
tied?
the appeal board, is it? No, they wouldn't.
Would the appeal board have their hands tied
No.
because the law states one thing and the order says another?
The law, the order does not define financially independent. It references to someone who is financially independent, but it does not define it financially independent.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that we're hearing around students is the housing issue and the housing guarantor issue for students in the UK. So we've got Jersey students struggling because guarantors are often required to be UK based, and a lot of the Jersey students don't have anybody in the UK that can act as guarantor. So has the government undertaken any work to see if this situation could be alleviated for those students?
Well, first of all, how many students have you heard from?
Well, it's common practice, so
Very common practice.
£51 per month is the normal amount that they're paying for
Well,
guarantor.
okay, first of all, we haven't had any appeals or complaints about the problem of securing accommodation. There are lots of different ways in which it's dealt with. That is an issue because you are taking accommodation and our laws are different. Of course it is. We have identified some challenges. Student Finance seeks guidance on the topic. They are generally using a guarantor company and pay rent up front to secure accommodation. Student numbers do remain consistent though, so it's not an issue that has stopped students applying or finding accommodation. People may have somebody in the UK, increasing numbers of universities with their overseas students are acting as guarantors themselves, and that's one of the things I think that is being addressed there. But if there is an issue, I would say to students to contact the student finance and see if there's any way in which we can help. We can't change the UK laws.
No, but the steps that potentially Jersey could take to help students and families to give financial assurance to landlords.
Well, I don't know, but £51 a month is what people are normally paying.
Well, they're not normally. Some are not. My children didn't pay that.
So would the department consider
just as much evidence as you
surveying
may have.
students and finding out what they are paying
Well,
to gather that information?
I think that's part of the issue, is that we're not actually hearing from that. So if people are coming to you,
Yeah.
they need to be coming to us as well.
I think some of them have, but would the department consider putting out like a survey or trying to find out more about this?
I'm sure we can look into doing something like that, or maybe making it part of the process when people do get in contact with student finance. Or
I mean, we receive a lot of emails from the student loans support group, which is run by one person, and that's fine. But
Well, this information is from students, not about the 51.
well, I would encourage them to contact us,
yeah,
because if you have specific cases where that's an issue, then get them to contact us. We can't know the unknowables.
At the moment, the government has got a student finance team.
Yeah.
Student finance, and that basically talks about money. In your view, should the government of Jersey have somebody who's directly accessible and a sort of a dedicated higher education officer who can support with kind of queries and issues and negotiations for facing Jersey students, be it in the UK or be it in Europe, that are actually outside of finance? Because at the moment, your student finance is just that. It is just about finance. It's not about accommodation issues. It's not about welfare issues. It's not about attestation, health and things like that.
Well, there's a couple of things. I think a lot of the universities help students with they treat our students as foreign students in that issue. I know that's what happened with my children to help with finding accommodation, etc., etc. I mean, we've got 1,300 students each year across a different stage of higher education. We haven't had no current evidence that that's acting as a barrier, and student finance not received anything about not being able to secure accommodation. To employ somebody new to look at those issues, I'm not sure is the right thing to do.
It's not just about accommodation. It's about having a higher education student officer.
Well, I think what we have to do
to serve those 1,300.
But those students are members of a university and they are paying fees. We are paying their fees. Therefore, they expect a service from that university as well. And we would expect that university to support them. And there is a lot of support in universities.
But I think the point is about having a dedicated higher education officer.
Well, that's the point you keep making. But what I'm trying to say to you is I don't think that's...
That person can then act as a go-between.
For
I
1,300
think
students.
I think ultimately, if we're made aware that there is an issue that's going on, I don't think that's something that we wouldn't rule out. Obviously, I think that's probably quite a good idea. But at the minute, we're just not aware that there is an issue and that there's a need for that, if you see what I mean. And if that is what the panel are receiving, then again, we just need to be made aware of it, and then we can put things in place like what you've just suggested. I wouldn't say that we wouldn't rule that out.
So is the answer no then, Minister?
To what?
The question was, should the government of Jersey have a directly accessible...
You mean a single person as a liaison officer with 1,300 students, regards accommodation, etc.? We have that with student finance. Student finance
are about finance, not about welfare, not about health, not about accommodation. Okay. And how big is your student finance team?
Well, I would suggest that what we do is what happens at the moment. We have an expectation of the services we are paying for at universities for students. They have student support that support their students, and they are specific to the university and the areas they're living in. So, for example, if you are living in Liverpool and at Liverpool University, I know there is student support there from my own experience of my children, one of my children, and they were given support there, but which was specific to
I
the
am
area.
fairly sure that everybody on this panel could give you a
Yeah.
different example where actually universities haven't been supportive because
Well,
the
if those-
students
in
are
those
Jersey
cases-
students.
Yeah, in those cases, let us know.
Okay,
And if and then if I believe that there is a need for a specific officer to do that, an additional officer, then of course I would support that because that helps our students. But we give a lot of support as well.
We need to move on, don't we?
Yeah, okay.
Yep, thank you. We're going on to the topic of online harms, Minister.
Yep.
The panel understands that SITE's new digital safeguarding and technology use policy was published on the 24th of November last year. Can you tell us about the implementation of that strategy in schools and what feedback, if any, the department has received so far?
Well, it was in November that the strategy was introduced. I think a lot of the work that's been done there is supported a lot by schools. You, Alexa, write it. Do you want to give your initial impressions and I'll give my view?
Yeah, absolutely. So the school the policy was published and provided to the schools in conjunction with schools had feedback, as did different department areas. So it was a more collaborative approach to ensure the best possible policy that we could have. So I haven't received any negative feedback at all. It may take some time for all areas to implement it in its completion, but that is expected, and we're there to support them on their journey to help develop the appropriate measures to ensure that they're meeting those practices.
I also mentioned as well that one of the advantages we have in schools is that the networks are controlled, so it's a lot easier for us to have that sort of safeguarding in place. Obviously, with the implementation, and the schools have done this very well, I believe, of not allowing mobile phones in schools. That's taken away another risk, but that exists elsewhere. But this policy, and I think, it's a policy. We have a much wider conversation to have across our island, and that has started. Well, it's been going on for some time. To look at that, and this is just one ingredient of that. But I think it's a very good. It's a good step forward in what we're doing. I think what you're going to have is a policy that is iterative every month, with the way in which technology is changing, AI is changing, etc. But it also has to be realistic about what we want to achieve with it. And I think there's a good balance there in what we have so far. But it can always be improved. Of course, we can as we go forward because things change so rapidly.
It is indeed. My next question relates to recommendation 31 from our report, which was that the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning should support digital literacy for all and make efforts to embed digital literacy into any lifelong learning ambitions for the island. Please could you outline why this recommendation was only partially accepted?
Yeah, well, Skills Jersey, we do deliver digital awareness across free online digital courses across already. The Better Business Support Packages also provide opportunities for business to access, upskill their staff in the line of digital requirements for their business. There are working groups in primary and secondary school supported by the institute directors to develop digital skills program for staff and children. So the partial acceptance was a recognition that a lot is already happening. Of course, we can always do more. Of course, because the world of digital, even the definition of it is quite interesting actually, is changing rapidly. So that was the reason for partial, because I want to recognise the work that's being done. But yes, I mean, we have a sort of strange juxtaposition between the notion of us just, not allowing any access, and then the need for digital literacy. And I think that balance needs to be there. It is easier within schools because we have more control over what is being accessed. I think in terms of lifelong learning, I think there is a lot of support for adults that's already there. But yes, of course, it can always increase.
And for school-age learners as well, those who may have...
Yeah,
Yep.
there's an awful amount that goes on in the classroom. I mean, I think you've delivered lessons yourself.
I have, yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, digital literacy is something in schools that is widely taught, particularly at primary level, to provide as a baseline for going forward. There is now a working group with both primary, secondary practitioners and IOD to support that further, to have a framework so that skill set is seen as more of a baseline and more equal across, to support the foundations then going into secondary school. So all the children are working from the same level.
Yeah, yeah. And how does that progress into the adult learning sphere as well?
So we're developing a framework in order to
As
be able
you're-
to
yeah.
look at all of those pathways.
Yeah, and the four areas where the investment is needed is in cybersecurity and digital resilience, which we've all been talking about recently, equitable access to technology and digital inclusion. That's a good debate as to what that means. We recognise the need for workforce capability, and particularly in the use of emerging technologies which are changing all of the time, such as AI, because AI can be useful in the workplace, and we have a generation coming through who needs to understand how that is applicable in the workplace. And you know what a sustainable digital infrastructure looks like, because it is such a changing world. So there's an enormous amount going on. I think that the key is to have a lot of communication, and we're having good work with the Institute of Directors, with schools, across our learning establishment, across the colleges and so on. So that work is going on, and I think it will continue. It has to continue. But yeah, it's a challenging area, but I think there is a real recognition of a need to adapt.
And parents, Minister, I mean, it's
Yeah.
obviously parents of the modern generation of children. Is there support for them as well?
Yeah, I think that's certainly an area which we've improved, but could be improved further. I think as well, it's about understanding what the reality actually is for parents sometimes. And I think they're not softer skills, but they're different skills in terms of that management of children with digital devices and how you're going to do that. You know, how you're going to say no with all the pressures that you have. I recognise that myself as a parent, but thankfully I missed that part. There's also some specific work. Sorry, do you want to?
So we have now launched our DigiSafe website, digisafe.gov.je, which the children named, and that's designed to support young people and families, and it provides scenarios that the children have brought forward, and to support parents in how to deal with some of those scenarios. And that's an ongoing piece, so it's a collaboration with a wide-ranging different parties, but including Jersey and SPCC, Safeguarding Partnership Board, and internal government, and parents themselves, and students.
So there's a lot of cross-government and cross-organisation work going on. And the good thing about that site, it was with young people. I went to the event, actually, and sat and spoke to them all about it, and they came up with a name, they came up with the reality of what this is and what it means. And there's a really good section on there for parents. There's one for children of different ages that parents can look at as well. So there's a really good source of information.
It's very helpful.
It's quite it's a good layout as well. I think it's called that, but I call it a layout. It's accessible.
Thank you, Minister. Again, we're going to go back to the recommendations. And recommendation 37, which was to ensure that there is an equitable approach to online safety across schools and that investment is provided for technology infrastructure and resources that enable effective and inclusive digital. Can you describe why this was partially accepted again?
Again, because of the work that's already ongoing.
Okay.
And there is work ongoing. I mean, I don't think I'm being finicky here. It wasn't an absolute that this work isn't ongoing. We recognise the need for more. We recognise, that we live in a technological world which will require investment, and it will require investment if we're going to have equitable, safe access to digital education. and there is inequity in our schools in terms of what can be afforded by parents and et cetera, et cetera. So that's why it was partially accepted again. Do you want to talk about some of the work that's going on? The other part of your question was, sorry?
The final part of it was to what sites was doing this year, in other words, before December, to progress this?
This year now?
So only talk about the infrastructure work
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
been doing.
Yep. So we have invested in some infrastructure for schools. So certain technologies are out of date now and require some replacement uplifting. So have purchased the hardware to be able to implement that across the schools. That work has already begun, and in the areas where the deficit was seen the highest, they were prioritised. But the plan is to roll out all of that to across all of the schools,
And
to then give them
Yeah.
greater access.
More robust network.
Yes.
I got to say, as Minister, when you look at this, it does look like a digital arms race sometimes. No matter how quickly we're updating and replacing, there's more there, it's out of date. But I think that the specific things that we're doing do improve that capability. And if you improve that capability, it will include access. It's no longer simply about how many laptops you have or how many iPads you have. It's much more complicated than that, and about the access that can be given to children. I mean, when we look back at COVID times, and there was a race to get everybody a digital device, and now we're looking at whether or not we want people to have digital devices. So the context will change as well. So it is complicated.
And contradictory in some.
And sometimes contradictory, but it's inevitably will be. But I think we're getting to a discussion across the island and across all of our organisations where I think there's a focus coming on to really make sense of what we really mean together about the safety of our young people, and that's a really healthy and positive thing that's come out of it.
Can I also just add in there, part of the reason for the partial acceptance is because actually we need more money. So there is a business case that's got to be put forward for the next budget as well. As we know, technology costs. So.
Oh yes, I've just bought a new phone, Deputy Minister, and that is quite an investment. Yeah.
Right.
Next question is about the government's policy about the use of educational technology in schools. We're back to that same question. If parents are concerned, for example, about their child's screen time and children are being set homework to do electronically, etc., etc., what is the government's position on this?
There is some guidance provided by Public Health, and that's on the DigiSafe Jersey website, which is very good. I mean, I was looking at that myself because it's really interesting. I get the questions, and my children are grown up, but I go into schools all the time and see what they're doing. I think there is a balance to be had, and I think that if a parent is concerned, the first place is to speak to the school. You know, it's sometimes it's a bit of a catch-22 because parents see the accessibility and the simplicity of online homework means we know what you're doing, we can track it, etc., etc. However, we do have to be careful of screen time. I think if we look at the guidance carefully and ensure that that guidance is being adhered to, that's our starting point. But what we do into the future in terms of the changing world of that, we need to address really carefully. I think part of the issue is when children have had screen time at school and then go home as well and want to use screen time for relaxing. Now, it could be, if you're a parent, you're setting up the most safe environment you possibly can. Brilliant, well done, but they're still having screen time, so it's another issue that's being added onto it. I think the days where we go back purely to books in schools is going to be very difficult. I think also that online learning is a very useful and accessible tool. I think it's just about getting the balance right and making sure that children are safe in all of this. And I think as our discussions move forward, we do have the opportunity to get that right.
And I think that yourself as Minister and teachers across the island are also concerned about homework being created by AI, etc.
Yeah. I have controversial views on homework. I personally would, I'm not going to say that, it's too controversial. Young people would love it, but I think sometimes, you know, homework as an extension of a lesson, particularly for older students, can be creative, you know, and I think there are other ways to do that. I think there is an expectation from homework from parents as well, and that expectation is a large piece of the workload. So things have been taken to make that simplified. Now we're at the point where we have to say, okay, where is the balance in setting that homework?
Yeah.
And we have to have that discussion again.
It aids research, which is very important for their later career.
Yeah. Well, I think, sorry, just say, once you get into A-level and, GCSE exams, I think there are other questions to have about the well-being of our young people and making sure they get breaks and making sure that it's a very stressful time. But that's an exam system that we've used for a long, long time. If you take away continuous assessment, you end up with more exams.
Can I just add as well, the purpose of setting homework online isn't because it's easy, it's because it sets up children's skill set to help them with digital exams that they're going to need going forward. So it's embedding that skill set, and they're not on screens all day in school.
That makes sense. It's just like, even in my constituency meetings, I've had parents, and not the campaigners as well, saying that they actually print out what's sent on the screen because they don't want their children on the screen.
I think the thing to do there is to contact the school and make that clear, and I'm sure we can make that change. If I was a teacher and was setting homework online, although it was some years ago we didn't set much, and that was wanted by a parent, then that's no problem whatsoever. That's about dealing with individual needs and individual...
I think even when we used to set physical homework, I'd often get students who had lost their sheets and hadn't come to see me beforehand to get another copy. So,
Oldest excuse in the book, that.
Yeah, teachers are, I think, quite flexible, and if parents want to have physical copies instead, it's
And the relationship between schools and parents is really important. We keep saying that. Yep.
Just a final one from me. The online harms interministerial group. Have you attended recently? What educational input have you put into that?
Yeah,
group?
I mean, the original meeting was regards the response to the review as well. Yes, in terms of the educational input, it's the sort of discussions we're having now in terms of, I'm pleased to be able to say, look, we have a controlled Wi-Fi access by not having mobile phones that being accessible. We can control what's accessible, what isn't, even what sites are used. So there is a model there.
Yeah.
That takes an enormous amount of work from teachers as well if they're going to use safely the resources they have, and there's a lot of checks and balances in place. So those are the types of input. The other input is to just understand the range, because we're talking about children who are very young to children who are, young people, I would say, 16 to 18 who are going to university. So the expectation, the rules around those might be very different. They might be less stringent later on than they are at the beginning, which is, I think, really important.
Thank you, Minister.
So it's context as much as anything, yeah.
All right, I've got some questions now on early years. So, Minister, with the acknowledgement that the additional funding for 2 to 3 year olds has only been running for a month, can you confirm if this is currently going to plan or, as anticipated?
Yep, application form remains on track to go live in February. Also on track to make the first payments in April. Further information has been available to parents via the government JE site and will be updated as the scheme goes live. The supplementary guidance has been issued directly to the settings with input from JA and the Jersey and JACC. And the JCCT, the Jersey Childcare Trust, you've seen as I think there's a piece in the news today, actually, it was sent to me just before this hearing, which is really positive, about a financial support service for parents who can't pay in advance, and the service will be launched in February to go live. So I think we have worked I've got to say, I don't know if this is the theme, but we've been hearing so much criticism recently, and I'm going to get on my high horse for 1 second, if I may, of civil servants and civil service and so on. And I've got to say that the work that's gone on in the background to get this working at speed with possible changes has been remarkable. And I think there needs to be credit given for those who have worked behind it, for the dedication and work that they put in to enable this to happen, because that will make the difference to people's lives later on. So I think we need to give some credit every so often.
It must have been an enormous amount of work to get this organised so quickly.
Well, could you say that there were things in place because we had backup plans? Okay, you have to look at scenarios. And it's because we spent a lot of time, we thought we had a different deal, we had things come to the government plan for change, but we had this in the background ready, and I think we could very rapidly. Jonathan, do you want to just very briefly, that's true, isn't it?
I think it's the accurate reflection, yes. And the important statement for me is that the work to create and to launch the scheme and the associated costs and time are all as planned. There's always a risk you come across something significant, the equivalent of finding asbestos in a building, and it stops you in your tracks. And okay, many a slip, as they say, but at the moment, as the Minister sets out, we're on track for the key milestones as previously advised.
Okay, and I don't know if you know this yet, but has the funding helped parents find new spaces for the children, or is the funding supporting those who already had nursery places? Do you know?
I would say the vast majority is for those who already have places. It was 90%.
Yes, so it's too soon to say in the context of actual applications.
Yeah.
I think that's something we could say in much more detail around the first half of this year, by which time we should have the first round of payments through and processed, if you like. But as the Minister says, the working assumption remains, given that the majority of parents have said they had some form of childcare already, that it's supporting existing costs as opposed to necessarily creating new demand. But these are the metrics that we'll keep a very close eye on.
I think one of the side benefits, I don't know if that's the right phrase, of the work with the Jersey Childcare Trust is I think that will inform us about those who perhaps would need, who may not have been accessing, because there is now a real support mechanism there. And I think that input, would be really beneficial for some families. And I think that is a real sea change for us and a really positive part of the scheme as is, and a good use of government money, I would say.
Yeah, okay, so could you outline the evidence base for adopting a universal entitlement rather than targeting the offer to families who need the help most?
Yeah, I think when I would say, from my point of view, but Jonathan, I mean, you have very much the evidence base. I thought it's the simplicity of it. I think it's about fairness for families, because having a child is an expensive process. Nursery is an expensive process, and there are a lot of people here who, perhaps on paper, it doesn't look too challenging, but the reality is that those costs are significant, and any support we can give to those families, I think, helps a great deal. I also think that money goes back into our economy, so it's a positive thing to do. And Jonathan, do you want to add anything to that? Because I've spoke very vaguely there, sorry.
Just to add to that, at the start of this work, we commissioned a firm to do some research international, by which we mean typically home nations, so UK, but also international evidence around what makes a difference, both in terms of to childcare development, but also to parents accessing the scheme, which I think is underpinning your question. And there was evidence to say that universal schemes led to better access, particularly for those groups you might be most concerned about. That paper is published. I can share that with you. It's on gov.j.
Yeah.
I think it's called the Evidence Refresh document, because it looks to say we understood this to be the case, but before we embark on the next round, we ought to go back and check our understanding still. So it was the greatest driver of access, particularly for those cohorts of the population for which there might be the greatest need, and that's the evidence piece we used to take a universal approach.
And can I ask then now about the operational side that's dealing with the repayments to parents? Can you confirm how many payments? Well, you haven't made payments to date, have you?
Payments aren't due. We've made a commitment from April to have that
And
payments
that will
out.
go back to the start of January, won't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay. Can you tell us what is the criteria for the support from the Jersey Childcare Trust? What presumably people just don't go to say, I need some help with the finance. What do they have to do?
Yeah, this is what was they were talking about today with that news story, because we have commissioned JCCT to do this work. Do you want to talk about some of the very specific areas?
Yes, the first thing is, helpfully, this has been something that the Jersey Childcare Trust have been doing for some time under their schemes. Yeah. So it's not new capability they're developing or new experience they have to develop. This is something in which they have good practice. It's a version, a variation of what we might be familiar with in the context of an income support review. It's not income support, it's their version of that. But it looks at the extent to which something can be afforded. So there is a budget planner put in. They do seek to understand committed costs and income. And then they'll take a view as to whether that's something they feel they should be supporting. And they're working that out on an individual basis. Okay, so each customer gets looked at.
So people would give an outline of their costs and their income.
Yes.
And it's if they not, it's not just limited to people who might be on income support. Other people could.
Correct. That was just the example of the kind of. the kind of eligibility mechanism they go through, they're making that
I
assessment.
think we keep it there. What was said there by Jonathan was that JCT just doesn't start from nothing. They have a relationship with lots of parents, lots of families where that encouragement, that support, which has been put there in the past, there's a trust there as well. So it's a positive thing for them to be able to do. And I think that there may be more likelihood of parents who are genuinely struggling to go to an organisation that they trust in order to get that help. And then we get the nursery, the quality nursery hours for their children. And in the end, that's what we want. So I think there are positives there.
Okay, and is SIDE supporting the Jersey Childcare Trust with that financial support?
Yes.
Yeah, so the idea is at the moment we're going to take a view on the extent to which that can be managed through their normal cash flow, the extent to which it causes any kind of pinches in their cash flow, and we're standing ready to make sure that at no point is the normal operation of JCCT compromised. So we're going to look at whether it's a weekly or a monthly recompense between government, but there's no loss that will be or no risk of loss at JCCT, either in a cash flow sense or a loss of money. So government's fully covering. It's just the order and the frequency with which we're invoiced and we make payments.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, they'll get the money back from the nursery thing because that's what the money's for. Yeah.
Can I just, if I may add to the previous question, in the context of how Jersey Childcare Trust are looking at eligibility for support, anyway, but also reinforced by this new measure, the teams in employment, social security and housing are also working with JCCT to identify if the support from government that families are missing out on, the JCCT identify. So it's very good collaboration and co-working, subject to the customer saying yes please, between government and the charity beyond just the 2 to 3 support.
Okay, great, thank you. I have a question now about childcare and the early years service. So the panel understands that the childcare and early years service requires health declarations for various individuals working with children in registered childcare settings. However, this extends to voluntary committee members of these settings. Please could you advise why this is the case?
Keys do not require, I don't think they did require volunteer committee members to complete a health declaration.
Because I looked
The
at it
form
on-
must be completed by any person who wishes to become registered to provide childcare. This is what it says on the form. Manage a childcare facility, work as a childminder or as a practitioner in registered childcare setting. This forms part of the process to ensure they're suitable to be cared for, as it would be. Let us check that because
Well,
I'm not entirely sure.
I've got the form here, and it's
Yeah,
for
okay.
anyone volunteering, and they have to state whether, for example, they have diabetes, if they take medication for heart
But,
problems,
is that
depression, and it seems a
but
bit
is that
over the top.
sorry? Is that volunteering to provide childcare?
It's okay.
It may just be the wording of a committee member that I've got to think through here.
We
But yeah, we
know-
don't want any obstacles to being. Is that?
No, so our understanding is that the intention is about volunteers who are then actively providing childcare, as opposed to volunteers who might not be providing childcare but might be providing administrative support or duties. But we can take that as an action to
Yeah,
double check.
so-
if
let's
you
double
like.
check that for you and get
So
some
I'm just,
clarity. Thank you.
I'm thinking about like maybe in a
No, you're
mother
right.
and toddler group or something, and volunteers helping. Are they expected to describe their health issues and
I think we'll have to we'll come back to you on
Yeah,
that.
but thanks for
but
raising
you're,
that.
You're
We'll-
talking
we'll-
specifically about people who are working directly with children.
It's not quite what the form says. It says
Yeah, let's-
volunteers,
let's-
stroke committee members of registered
Yeah, let's check
settings.
that because we don't want to get in the way of anything.
And I think that's been enforced by Keys.
yeah. So you'll get back to us on that,
Yeah,
will
get
you?
back to me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that's
Thank you. I had some questions about school funding. At the end of 2025, following the publication of a Freedom of Information request, it was reported that there's significant debts across island schools as at the 31st of October. Can you describe what the position was at the 31st of December for both primary schools and secondary schools, please?
Schools aren't in debt.
Deficit, I said.
Oh, I thought you said
Yeah,
debts.
deficit.
Deficit. Do you want to? You've been absolutely on top of this. Do you want to?
So your question is, what was the position at the end of?
Yeah, of how many primary schools recorded a year-end deficit and how many secondary schools recorded a year-end deficit?
We have
No,
go on.
So 13 primary schools are in a deficit or overspend position at the end of the year. 9 provided primary schools are in a surplus or break-even position. In terms of government secondary schools, all were in a deficit position, although the position at Kennervey, Hope Valley and Holier was only a small amount. For the fee charging schools, Victoria College and Victoria College Prep schools were in a deficit overspend position, while JCG and JCP broke even. But we also had an overspending position in our special schools.
And it is
Can
the
you
special.
clarify how you're going to be addressing those deficits, please?
Carry on.
Yep, please do.
Absolutely. So we've been during 2025 re-establishing our financial systems to support schools, because we do recognise that there are financial challenges in schools. So we have set up a finance board essentially, and a series of finance boards for those schools that are in deficit or significant deficit. We keep a very watchful eye on those that may be creeping into that position as well, and we report on that on a monthly basis. So officers from SIPES alongside education professionals, including other head teachers, are working with the head teacher and the senior leadership of those schools to look at their planning, their curriculum planning, their staffing, with a particular emphasis around inclusion, because we know that's one of the drivers in schools for overspending positions. So we can understand, are these factors unique to those individual schools? Is it systemic? But also in partnership with other schools, is there anything we can do to start mitigating some of these financial challenges by schools working more closely together? And also centrally, and then within partnership and groupings of schools, how they can potentially work together to mitigate some of those issues as well. So quite a lot going on in that space to try and support, but we do recognise obviously.
Yeah, and I think this emphasises 2 key things that we have been very open about. One is the challenges from SEN, and we commissioned reports. We've taken the, full front of that report and quite open about that. Also about the way in which we need schools to collaborate more together and share the skills that I have. Staffing is the vast majority of schools. We have really good skills out there and good practice. A benefit of that is you share that good practice more, and also as demographics change over the next 10 to 15 years, we will have to address these things anyway. The work I think that needs to go on in post-16 also will address some of these issues. So that's one of the challenges we have.
Can you describe the changes that are going to be made to the funding formula for 2026 and any of the reasons for these?
I think I'll pass to Jonathan, who's the expert in this space.
So
funding formula, yes.
There's been very, very little by way of change in the funding formula for 2026. From memory, the only substantive change was for a school that was moved towards funding on the basis of a blended early years as opposed to a separate reception and nursery, which is a consequence of very small numbers in both those settings. Other than that, what we'll be doing when we publish is just reflecting some of the recommendations from the secondary funding review. So, for example, I think recommendation 9 was about making clear which roles are mandatory, and I think another one, possibly 11, let me look at my notes, yes, was a date of the last rate increase. So we will make some structural changes to the report to reflect those recommendations. Otherwise, very, very little change.
Okay, when will the formula be published for 2026?
I'm aiming by the end of Q1 this year, so end of March.
That's the end of April
And
26.
will there be any sort of political or ministerial input in sign-off before the election period on that? Or
It's the budgets are approved and they're issued to the formula November, December of the prior year. So we've already gone through that route. This is simply the publication because we committed to be transparent and just share the workings.
And is there sufficient sort of wriggle room in that to make sure that any special or additional educational needs that have been identified have got adequate time to have the funding catch up with them?
There's always a challenge. I think Keith and the Minister have referenced the inclusion pressures. We're trying to, as much as possible, front load and align planning as it relates to identification of the need, the extent to which that need might generate additional funding, advising the school, then giving the school enough time to perhaps recruit or rejig their resources before the child arrives, particularly in those transition phases. It's absolutely not perfect by any means, and some of our challenge at the moment is around better planning and earlier and better aligned. We're just going to keep doing that until we get it as slick as possible.
I think it's probably fair just to say to Matt that we absolutely recognise that's one of the biggest challenges to school budgets in terms of.
Does the funding follow the child?
It does do, but the pace that it does can cause schools to be almost like overstaffed in one area and understaffed in another area because of children moving around requiring that staff and support.
So what actions have been taken to address that kind of blockage?
So when we are looking at the funding at the moment and whether the way we allocate special educational needs funding is the right way to enable us to close that gap. But also I mentioned earlier about schools working more closely together and potentially sharing resources to manage those kind of movements between children to different schools.
And we know that not every child with a special need or additional need has a record of need. Is a record of need an absolute necessity in order to access the additional funding?
So additional funding is provided to schools through the formula in terms of base inclusion funding, and on top of that we do have funding for records of need. We are looking at the whole funding model at the moment because we need to recognise. Sorry,
That's all right. No, you're in full flow. I was trying to say this is exactly what we need to address. We have had a model that is sort of analogous to the digital world, but in a very different way. There has been change, a real recognition of change, recognition of need, and the formula and everything that goes behind it, the record of need that you talk about, and that method of funding. That needs to be looked at very carefully. I think in the longer term, we will have to make an investment. There is an opportunity for that investment because as school numbers go down, if you keep the money in the system, you can use it more effectively, and you can use it more effectively if you work across schools as well. So it won't be extra money, but it'll be money that's there so that there is money available to give the best possible support that we can. And I think that dialogue over what we mean and what schools have to address in terms of SEN across the board is one that is open now. And whenever you open a dialogue like that, you're going to have challenge at the beginning. That's okay. That's good. But you have to come to some sort of agreement in the long term and a change that will work for everybody so that everyone wants to do the best. I think everyone's intention, teachers, parents, certainly the department as well, is in the right direction.
There was a lot of media reports last year about La Pastorelle School. Can you outline the challenges that school have faced and explain exactly what steps have been taken to address them?
Yeah, there are a number of challenges in terms of I would say that the first issue for the school, I think, is the actual accommodation itself. I think that needs to be addressed, and we're addressing that.
We had a visit actually up to La Pastorelle and we were quite stunned by the condition of the physical buildings.
We've been up there, we spoke to their students as part of the post-16 review. The new build is on track, and it's funny that people mentioned there are always little ruts in the road. We found a few in terms of buildings of that age with asbestos. You have to be extremely careful. But that is still on track to be up and running, so that's good. I think in terms of staffing, there has been some change and there has been some addressing of the way we structure that, and I think that becomes part of the wider look at the way in which we deal with children with all types of need. It is a challenge because we are dealing with individuals and we're dealing with children and we're dealing with change. But I think that the changes that are being made now are for the positive, and I think there is a real opportunity there to get things very right.
Okay,
Do you want to? I don't want to talk about individuals because I don't think that's fair. I think we need to look forward as to where we are now, but I want to hope that the children, the parents can have confidence in where they are, have, that pride in their school, because it is their school, particularly as we develop new buildings and we look carefully about the way that will be adapted. Also, remember, the Passerelle Primary is still in porter cabins, and if we get on with the school in town, they will have specific facilities as well, which is really important. And it sends the right message. We do care. We're trying to do the right things here.
Just to give you a bit of a kind of date update, so the completion dates has been pushed back, and the new school, we're looking to open it at the start of next term following the Easter holidays. So that was, you know, it was due to be completed obviously before January. But there's, I mean, I'm happy to go through the issues, but there's probably
It might be better to do those offline because
Yeah.
there were some very
Okay.
specific things.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Minister, you accepted the panel's recommendation in the secondary school funding review, published in 24, that the government should define measurable outcomes for providing a first-class education service to students in government-provided schools. Can you provide an update on the status of that work?
Yeah, well, so I think as we go through the review of where we are across our schools, as we've changed the structure in terms of bringing people into the department and head teachers into the department, I think the notion of what we mean by that, I think, becomes clearer and clearer. I mean, how we define that is the challenge for all education systems. I think a lot of the work that we've been doing over post-16 work, a lot of the work we've been doing in terms of the structures of our schools will feed directly into that, and I think it's a much wider piece. So we've completed consultation with students. We've published a report on post-16. We are looking at the modernisation of the Highlands campus, and that's in an actual plan with a number of sites that could be available. Am I missing anything? Do you want to add anything to that?
I think that the question was about measurable outcomes being defined, so is that...
Well, I mean, we will always measure by outcomes in terms of results. We will have to. That's meaningful. But I think as well, one of the really key things that we're doing is looking at publishing all of our data so that it's much more open. And I think that's a key thing in terms of looking at the way in which those outcomes will be defined. I think it's very, very difficult to say this is the number that makes a school great. We also have the school review framework, which has changed, which is looking very specifically at the quality of a school in a much wider context. And I know those two words are contradictory, but they're not. If you're looking at what the school does overall, not just exam results, I think you get a much better picture of what a school does. And there's a specific view to say we cannot reduce down the school's performance simply to a set of data in terms of its results. We want our children to do well. Of course we do.
Yeah.
That's really good. But you said something then about publishing more data. Can you mention what data that would be?
Well, what we've heard in the past is whenever we publish anything, we end up with 1 million FOIs just asking for sets of data which are completely out of context. So what we want to do more is on our sites is to publish all data around, school numbers, results, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But what that requires is it requires people to understand context, and we will give context to that data. And I've said this before, one of the biggest problems we have with our data, it is a very small data set, and comparison is really, really difficult. Yeah. And so I'm tired for the department having to look like it's protecting itself all the time. I don't think that's fair. I think there's so much success with our young people. We need to get that out there, and then we need to put the context in place so that people can understand that better.
Sure. Has a decision been made about the future funding of the fee-paying schools and whether they will move totally onto the funding or if they will remain partially on the average weighted pupil unit calculation?
No, there hasn't been a decision made on that yet.
Thank you. Thank you for being honest, Minister.
That's fine.
Okay. One of the panel findings from the Secondary Education Review related to the lack of investment in information technology in schools. We've already mentioned that.
Yeah.
Over an extended period of time. And the Minister accepted at that time the panel's recommendation to consider how greater investment in technology could be made available. What is the government's current policy position on this?
Well, first of all, I maintain what I said before. We do need to look for more investment. However, I think we also need to be very aware of the context that we are in as an island at the moment and the discussion around online safety, digital safety, etc. And we need to come to some conclusions as to where we're going to be with that. So, for example, let's give two extremes of the outcome. One outcome is we have no digital access in school. As an island, we decide we will not put anything in there. It simply won't happen. Well, we wouldn't be investing anything at all.
Faraday cage.
Faraday cage, there we go, buy one big Faraday cage. The other end of the, and we're talking extremes, so just by way of example, the other extreme is that we have a huge investment and everything's online, etc., and that will be a different need. Somewhere in the middle there will be a successful investment into our digital access across our schools and our organisations. And I think it's what we talked about before in terms of the investment, where it is now and where we need to go forward. I think the problem with IT is it is a bottomless pit of money.
Yeah.
If you, I don't know.
So at the moment we're trying to, we're understanding the future costs and what investment's going to be needed within those 4 areas that the Minister mentioned earlier.
And I think those costs need to be targeted appropriately as to what we want to provide in the longer term, following our discussions with online safety as well, because I think it will change it.
Sure, and that was my next question, is about the plans, but you've already answered that question. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay, so I have some questions now about school staff vacancies.
Yep.
Minister, what are the current teaching staff turnover rates for both primary schools and secondary schools, and how have they changed over the past year?
Okay, so the turnover rate in overall is 4.78%. That's the correct figure. I'm just making sure I read my graph correctly. It was 4.97% in 2024. To give a comparison, the Government of Jersey overall turnover is 7.2%. I will say, though, I could now sit back and say that's great. Let's put it in context, though, and I know about this very, very well, having been a head of department. This time of year, there are fewer vacancies because now is not the time of year. It's the May half term that you tend to have changes, because that is the time to finish by the summer term, to hand in notice by the summer term. We don't predict huge numbers. Well, you have to wait and see, obviously. You hope you don't. If you're a head of department, you're hoping you're keeping all your staff, particularly the really good ones. Vacancies that exist now may well be due to retirements or people moving on, and people wanting to advertise early to get rid of the best possible person in post, or if you promote internally at this time of year, for example, then you leave a post for May, and that's an opportunity perhaps to get less experienced teachers in to give that sort of new blood.
That figure you just mentioned, is there a difference between the primary schools and secondary schools?
Secondary is 5.46 and primary is 2.84.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, are there any specific areas of concern that need to be addressed, do you think, or not?
Well, I can answer that in two ways. One, overall in the teaching world, physics, maths, those subjects, perhaps language teachers as well. I know they're like hen's teeth. If you know a physics teacher, let us know. And in terms of where we are, I think there are some vacancies around science, for example.
Yeah. Okay, that's been like that for a long time.
Yeah. It's a difficult subject.
Okay, and are there any permanent roles currently covered by agency staff?
There's one permanent role covered by agency staff where the school has been able to recruit successfully at this time. 5 agency staff long-term absence, such as illness, parental leave. So there's one post where we haven't been able to recruit. I can't tell you specifically what that is at the moment, but I can find out for you.
So that's only 6 agency staff in
Yeah.
total?
5 covering
Illness and
parental leave, 1 covering a permanent role.
Yeah.
So it's only 6.
Okay, and what would be the equivalent cost of a member of agency teaching staff if they were employed on a permanent basis?
Yeah, okay, so is it okay to give the daily rates? I suppose it's fair.
Absolutely.
In the public domain. So the agency staff rates range from £335 to £480 per day. Locally based supplies top day rate is £333, so they're similar at the lower rate. The average cost of local supplies is £310 per day, so they're slightly more expensive for agency staff. I will say though that we had a situation where agency staff have been very good and taken a permanent position, I believe, which is good as well. They do tend to be around specific areas of the curriculum. I won't say because I don't know, but if you were asked, if I was a betting man, I would put it around something like physics or maths or one of those subjects that we need that it's been difficult to recruit for. But that is a low number. I mean, I agree with you. I think it would be better to perhaps not have any agency staff, although it gives us flexibility. But the numbers, I believe, have gone down.
Are we just trying to get the numbers?
Yeah,
So,
they have.
my next question is how many agency teachers are currently employed? But is that any different from the permanent roles?
No, 6, yeah.
So it is 6 anyway.
Yeah. Ranging between 5 weeks and 38-week
Yeah.
long contracts.
Okay.
Can I just say, we do have some more specific data of how much a comparison of a permanent teacher and an agency teacher in terms of including social security, but I think we should give that to you afterwards,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Yes, yeah. So are delays in approvals from SIPES for permanent recruitment a factor in the employment of agency teachers? So this is around missing the recruitment window when teachers have to resign by a certain date. Does this complicate the matter and mean agency teachers end up getting employed when otherwise not?
The answer overall is no, but people do have to remember their resignation dates and stick to them. So it gives us time to recruit, and that they are just before Christmas and at the Easter term for the summer, for example. So that gives the school time to recruit. You know, the recruitment freeze is not affecting frontline teachers.
You say that the recruitment freeze is not affecting frontline teachers, but is there still a bureaucratic process behind that in order to be able to recruit?
Yeah, of course there is, yeah.
So how is that acting as a factor?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. It's a lot better than it was.
Okay.
Let me put it that way. It brings back memories of my frustration. It is a lot better than it was. I'll be honest with you, Keith, it is a lot better than it was.
But
There
still
will
room for improvement.
I haven't heard that it's led to any agency
Yeah.
teachers being recruited. Though if there have been frustration at the pace of something, I would understand that.
So is that frustration coming through to the department then because of the central people services forms that need filling in and
It's just part of the process of recruiting in the government of Jersey
in the recruitment freeze?
at this particular time. Yeah.
I think as well, that just to say, I think the better communication between the department and the schools will highlight that quicker than it ever had before. I think that's a really key thing. I think the main issues with recruitment are around finding the right person, because we still have to find the right person. You know, the worst case scenario for a head of department is to have a field of one, because they may be okay, but it may not be what you want, and that's a really difficult decision. So that's the main issue. Been there.
Okay. All right, I'll just ask a question now about the teachers' terms and conditions. So the last budget included additional funding of 1.8 million per annum for the teachers' terms and conditions, and it was advised that this would be used to increase the time available to teachers for planning, preparation and assessment. So can you describe how the effectiveness of this increased PPA time will be evaluated?
Yeah. First of all, this is starting from January, and we know that terms start in September. However, I believe when we spoke to the union and said, well, do you want us to wait in September? They said no, and we didn't want to wait till September. It may well be that some schools have already been making this PPA time, but now there is some money to actually cover that, which is a good thing, which might be part of the deficit issues. We'll address some of those. In terms of its evaluation, we would need to see some sort of clarity over the whole piece in terms of the way in which that's been effective. Keith, you've been doing a lot of work with the unions as well.
Yeah, so we are trying to accelerate this as quickly as possible. The budgets have been delegated or passed to schools, So schools are now actively looking to recruit. Jonathan may have some updates on numbers there. We continue to meet with our unions regularly and they give us feedback on how it's feeling on the ground, but we're also have the opportunity to survey staff throughout the year and just to understand whether there is a kind of an impact and a feel that this is resulting in improved working conditions, improving their time for planning.
This is also the first time there's been any money put directly to this, and it's in January. So is it perfect? Absolutely not. Of course not. However, there's an opportunity here for us to do what we can and to learn from it, and that's exactly that type of follow-up. I'm sure there will be issues somewhere along the line, or things won't be recognised, or it may not be used as effectively as perhaps we want. But the thing about a department is it needs to recognise that and then make that change. You know, Ofsted used to define an excellent department as one that is self-improving. I'm not a great fan of Ofsted, however, I think if we're self-improving from what we learn from our experiences of this, then I think that's a good thing as we go forward.
Okay, so maybe this would help towards reducing staff turnover if people feel better able to.
Well, I certainly think it will help. The aim is to help improve with workload by providing more planning time.
Okay, and have you received feedback from the teaching unions, and if so, what is it?
I suppose.
No, I'm more than happy to.
No, go on. I'll say my piece after.
I just kind of commented on it earlier. As I said, the money has been, passed to schools. It's about now the pace of how we can recruit staff into those roles to enable teachers to have that additional hour of PPA. So, unions are just encouraging us to do all that we can alongside school leaders to make this happen as quickly as possible. But as you're aware, this is going to happen throughout this spring and then into the summer term, but we all want to get this up and running as quickly as possible.
Okay, so the unions are supportive of this change.
Yeah, and I think that we all recognise you could always have more, and we want to do this, but I would say, and I think the understanding is, look, we've got to make the best of what we have here. This is a model for where we go into the future. This is genuine money into the system for the first time. We have a good relationship with the trade unions. And I think that cooperation and that reality of where we are, I think will help us build for the future. So that's important.
Okay, so
and I thank them for that.
And this is like a starting point to try and get it
Yes,
right,
absolutely.
and there may be adjustments in the future then.
Yeah.
Right, okay, thank you.
Be my advice.
Thank you. I've got some more questions about the Gerrier funding and teaching, please. The last budget saw the government make a commitment to ring-fence the 670,700 funding for Gerrier in the education budget. Can you tell us how much of that funding is allocated to secondary and how much to primary? Or is it all in the same pot?
It's all in the same pot, yeah.
I think we can provide more information to you outside of here about the kind of allocation of time to those areas, if that would help.
I think that would be helpful. Is any of that funding allocated to adult education at all?
Yes.
Yes. So within that, there is a commitment to support the heritage aspect of delivering Gerrier. We are looking at the moment quite actively about how we can define those two areas to keep the teaching part for teaching and the heritage part for heritage. So we're in the process of formulating plans which the Minister's considering at the moment.
Okay. What progress has been made with renewing the Gerrier strategy then, which expired in 2025?
I think there's a meeting going on as we speak, I believe. There has been drafts of it. So yes, it's on its way. But again, it's not just about strategies, it's about the other things that we do as well. But yes, it's on its way.
Because in the non-staff budget for 2025, there was an allocation of 105,000, but only 30,000 of that was spent. So, for example, Gerrier development, the budget was 5,000, but actually only £9 of that was spent. What are the plans for the department to actually spend the budget that's allocated to their non-staff this year?
I think we go back here to the delineation, I think is the word, between the teaching and the other elements. And I think that some clarity there will help with that spend, to help that, okay, where is this money going? What do we want to use it on? Why was that used? Because that budget may not have been spent, but for areas that address the things that that budget may have been used for, may have been addressed. I personally would be very, if I was a head of department and I had so many different lines of budget, I'd find that very confusing because when you're delivering something across the piece, they often interlink. So I think we need to look at that structure as well. But yes, I mean, if you've got the money, spend it, of course.
I'm just interested in this relationship between SIPES and education, heritage, strokes, art,
Yes.
art culture.
Exactly.
So how is the Office de Gérier funded? Is that funded from within your SIPES budget?
It is, yeah.
So all the money towards Gérier comes from economic development and it goes to SIPES.
No, it's funded into our base budget.
It's funded into your base budget.
Yeah.
And then anything that Office de Gérier wants or anything through heritage, they have to get it from your budget. Is that correct?
They're allocated that from our budget, yes.
They're allocated. How much are they allocated?
I don't know, I need to come back to you.
We need to come back to you on that. But that's exactly the conversation we're having at the moment, because that should be clear. It should be clear, not only, okay, there's levels of clarity here, not only we can say how much has been allocated, but also what it's specifically for, what it's hoping to achieve, how many teaching hours that we can have, how many delivery hours should be in the classroom from each teachers. They're on teaching terms and conditions, for example, so that's different. We'd have certain expectations.
I understand that from
and that clarity needs to be put together.
I understand that from a SIPES perspective.
Yeah.
But when you've got money from SIPES that is supposed to be going to the Office de Gérier to fund adult teaching or wider community teaching, and what certainly I'm being told is that money is not filtering from SIPES into heritage.
Well, first of all, I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
And second, this is exactly the work that we're doing at the moment. So there is that clarity, so we don't have to have that discussion about that money not being there. Because then, just to say about in terms of the adult education, for example, there can be certainty as to what that delivery looks like and where the money's coming from.
Is the 2025 funding then, that has historically been passed into the Office de Gérier, going to be maintained in order to maintain the staffing complement they have at the moment for the adult education?
The adult education will be maintained, yes. The model of how we do that will depend upon the negotiations and the discussions as to what the best structure between those two parts
Will
are.
people who are receiving Gérier lessons online in the same ways they have been for the past few years?
Online?
Some of it's online.
Yes,
adult
yes,
education
yes, because
is all, practically all online, and it's very successful, 40 or 50 students. Will those 40 or 50 students continue to be able to receive their Gérier lessons?
Yes, we would not want to stop adult education. If the model of adult education changes, that might change anyway, because if you lose a member of staff or someone changes their mind, you've got to be adaptable.
So the funding will be forthcoming from your SIPES ring-fence budget into l'Office de Gérier in order for them to maintain their online teaching?
It will be to maintain their teaching, whether that's online or not, is up to the decision-making process as to the best delivery of Gérier teaching.
But I'm just worried about the delay, because you've said the discussions are ongoing at this point in time. What about the students that are, and the teaching staff who are contracted to deliver it?
Well, they're not changing at the moment. But we do have to look at that, what we're doing with Gérier in terms of those two things. It's been too complicated for too long. I think everyone agrees that we have to have this distinction between the delivery of teaching and the other areas of Gérier, which might be wider and more to do with heritage. That discussion has been going. It's been very positive, and I think we're very close to a point where we can make that really, really clear and really distinct, and then everyone knows what they're doing. Everyone knows where the money's going and knows how it will be spent.
When is that likely to?
Well, that's going to be very, very soon. I'm hoping by the end of next week.
The end of
this
next
week.
week.
Yeah.
This week. Okay.
However, it has to be the right thing. We can't just say, you see, when you say it's been very successful, we need to check that that is the case. You know, you asked me to define success before. We have to do the same with our Gérier teaching. Yes, there's a lot of money going into it, 600 and something thousand pounds, and we want to make sure it's being spent appropriately, and we're doing the best we can in order to keep the language going, revive the language, and get to a new generation of the language. the main key areas, I'm sure, behind the strategy.
When will the strategy be completed?
Well, I believe the strategy has been completed. It's just sign off, really, because of a number of departments involved.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yes, and the panel's really interested to keep following this up because we brought the successful amendment to ring fence that funding for
Indeed.
area. Now, this is our last public hearing, as we all are at the moment, and so we wanted to ask Minister, what are your overarching reflections on this term of office, and any commitments that remain unfinished? You know, what would you want to be progressed by the next minister? So what is it? What are your overarching reflections?
Overarching reflections. Well, it's only been 2 years, not a full term. So we've had to work very quickly. When I took over the role, the entire teaching profession was on strike. It wasn't within a week. So we've moved that forward. Relationships are much better now. There was a 3-year pay deal. We've got money for terms and conditions for the first time ever. Probably never as much as anyone wants, but we're there. So I think that's positive. We've not been afraid to take on the difficult challenges and the difficult things such as the review into SEN. I think the department itself has got much more clarity in roles. We're taking people in from schools so that we know what you're doing, and SIPES understand schools more, schools understand SIPES more. That's an ongoing process which needs to happen. I've seen, and I'll say this, a growing confidence in the department, across the department, in terms of the work we're doing, because there's clarity in what people's roles are. And a classic example of that is the 2 to 3 year olds. That's happened very rapidly. We took on pilots in the first year, and then we actually got the money. I thought that would be the most difficult thing. We won that money and then got on with it, and now it's been delivered. Some other highlights are obviously the school meals has been absolutely excellent. It's a great thing to do. There's been, what else is there? I think, I'm very proud to have taken on the role. It is a massive challenge because everybody knows about education because everyone went to school. So everyone's an expert, which is absolutely fine. I get that. But it's always an interesting challenge. I think it's a shame we only had 2 years and not 4 years because we could have done a lot more. I think I'm very proud of the work we've done on post-16 and going and talking to young people. We have had huge amounts of engagement with young people, be it the Jersey Youth Assembly, Youth Parliament, the groups that we've spoken to. We've gone and spoken to young people about mobile phones. We spent a lot of our time in schools, actually, and I'm really pleased that that voice is being heard because we at our peril ignore the voices of young people. That's a huge error because they are the future of this island. I mean, there's been some difficult decisions, some decisions which, I've taken, such as the letter regards to mobile phones and schools and trying to support schools to say don't have them in schools. I noticed that the UK are finally following suit with the same thing. That was an interesting Radio 4 morning when I listened and thought, I've already done that here. I wonder if they mentioned Jersey, but they didn't. In terms of future ministers, there's two things here. First of all, whoever's in this role next, whoever it is, should have just been on the doorstep talking about their manifesto and their beliefs and what they want to stand for. So it should be very easy for them to walk into the post and have a clarity in what they want to do. Otherwise, what have they been campaigning on? That's my first thing. Second, would I tell them what to do? I don't think that's the right thing to do because it would probably be ignored. My advice is very strongly, please address post-16. Because if you get post-16 right, everything before it falls into place. Please make sure that you try and keep the money in the system, even though demographics decrease, because you will get better outcomes for everybody and for the future of this island. Apprenticeships are really important, and working towards a sustainable method of statutory apprenticeships is really, really important. Piecemeal changes and just throwing a little bit more money here and there, it does not work. You'll be hearing about the Green Skills Academy that's been set up at Highlands in conjunction with Jersey Electricity in the next few weeks, which I think is an excellent model for future training on island for an entire industry, which is a really good cooperation between our provider and industry. And that's the type of thing we need to look forward to in the future. And what else is there? I don't know. Anything you want to add? I've covered quite a lot.
I think I would just say that I think the separation of the role from the children's minister has actually enabled us to kind of really focus in key areas and policy and things like that. I think it's a massive portfolio in itself, and when you combine it with children as well, I think it's a lot for one person to take on.
And one final thing, I will mention the work we've done on higher education, because they have been small changes, a bit at a time. You know, when I walked into the role, I did face quite a few propositions that wanted to define what I was going to do, but we had to address that, and we've tried to cover those, but we've done it in a piece by piece way, in a controlled way, in a meaningful way, from the really good work that's gone on with officers, so that it's a sustainable change long into the future. And I think that's the key message for anybody. It's okay to do things quickly, but it's a really good idea to do things and think 4 or 5 years ahead. Will they still be working then? And if you think they won't, then you've made a small piecemeal change, and I would advise you not to do it. However, that's just a piece of throwaway advice for anyone who wants to listen to it.
Okay.
All right.
Right, well, I think we've come